Well, Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. Glad to see everyone back for another edition of the God Honest Truth live stream. And tonight we're excited to bring you a brand new series, unlike anything we've probably ever done. But unfortunately, hopefully you haven't got your hopes up too big, because tonight is just going to be a general overview of slavery as we begin to get ready for our teaching next week about slavery in the Bible. So this teaching is going to be all about slavery as an overview, about what it is, where it's been practiced, things like that. So definitely make sure to stick around tonight to understand more about slavery, where it's been practiced, who practiced it, in order to get ready for our more specific teaching next week about slavery and the Bible. But now, before we get to tonight's teaching on slavery, what we're going to be doing is like always, we're going to be doing our liturgy, our Torah portion, our Haftorah portion, and our Brit Hadashah portion, like always. Now, if you're just joining us for the first time, we are God Honest Truth, and we are a messianic ministry that is based out of Western North Carolina. You can find out more about us by going to www.godhonesttruth.com, and there you can find our social media links to our video and audio podcasting platforms, article teachings, audio Bibles, resources to help you in your learning of Hebrew and Greek, and so much more. So go check it out today at www.godhonesttruth.com. So without any further ado, and to get right into tonight's service and live stream, let's go ahead and go to our liturgy. Kol balevav panima Nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ufate Misrak Kadima Ayin Lezion Sophia Odlo Avda Tikvatenu Ahatikva bashnot alpayim lahiotam koshi behartenu eretz Zion verushalayim lahiotam koshi behartenu eretz Zion verushalayim. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Mahuto Leolam Wahed. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. Blessed be his name, whose glorious kingdom is for eternity. And you shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And have these words which I command you this day be upon your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and let them be frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. So like always, for the announcements this week, we want to take just a moment to remind everyone to continue to be in prayer for the nation of Israel. It's always been tumultuous over there in the Middle East, but especially here in the past few years. So continue to be in prayer for everyone living within the borders of the Promised Land, the Israeli Defense Forces, anyone who still may be in a hostage situation, and especially now that the hornet's nest has been poked. So that being Iran. But keep Israel in your prayers, and also your own individual countries in your prayers, that they would do the right decision and support Israel against these Islamic terrorists. And here's your list of upcoming episodes for about the next 2 months or so. And tonight, like I said, we're going to be doing just a general overview of slavery in general, just so you get a better understanding of what slavery is, what it looks like, the various types of it, who practiced it throughout history, things like that. And that's all to get ready and to better understand, so that when we do next week's episode, is what's going to be all about the Bible and slavery, you'll have a better understanding of what slavery is, how it compares or doesn't compare to the biblical form of slavery. So tonight it's going to be all about slavery in general, but nothing about the Bible. Next week is going to be all about the Bible and slavery. So make sure to tune in next week and every week at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday evenings for each of these upcoming episodes. And here's your list of upcoming feast days and Moedim for about the next year or so. And our next upcoming Moedim is going to be Yom Teruah, and that starts on Monday, September 22nd at sunset and runs through September 24th at sunset. If you would like to know more about what Yom Teruah is, how to celebrate it, where it comes from, all that good stuff, make sure to tune in about 2 weeks or so before the actual feast day or Moedim, and we'll have a dedicated episode all to that particular feast day or Moedim, so that you can find out all about it and still have time to get ready and prepared to celebrate it. And if you have any prayer requests that you would like to have announced live on air, make sure to have those in to us by Thursday evening at the latest, because we do go live on Friday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you would just like us to pray with you and for you without announcing it on air, we can do that as well. As always, send all prayer requests to our email, which is team@godhonesttruth.com. So now, if you would, please join us for a moment of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all that you have blessed us with, even the blessings that we may not recognize sometimes, Father. We lift up to your remembrance the promised land and those living within the borders of Israel. We ask that you be with them, and we ask that you be with the Israeli Defense Forces as they fight against the very evil that is trying to annihilate just anyone who has anything to do with Israel. We ask that you be with those who still may be in a hostage situation, that you give them a sense of peace and protection and guidance, and deliver them from this bondage and from this captivity, Father, quickly, but all according to your will. We ask that you be with us, that you would open our minds and humble our hearts to what you would have us to learn from your word. And we ask that you be with us through this next week, Father, so that we may bring glory and honor to your name. For all this we ask in your holy and heavenly name. Amen. And now, back to our liturgy. Blessed are you, O Yahweh our God, who has given us the way of salvation in Messiah Yeshua. He walked among us, filled with your Spirit. The only one who ever perfectly fulfilled your Torah, he healed the sick and raised the dead. The multitudes of our people sought his touch. He taught as no man taught. With authority he brought forth the treasures of the Torah. How the children sought him. The lepers he touched and made clean. How the despised and outcast found love and release from their sin. How the hypocrites feared him, whose words uncovered their sin. Despised and rejected, acquainted with grief, he bore the sins of Israel. All we, like sheep, have gone astray, turned every one to his own way. Our iniquities were laid upon the King, the sins of the world, his burden to bear. He rose from the dead and opened the way to life everlasting. Praise his name. We are in him. His Spirit empowers. New life is ours with joy and peace. Blessed are you, O Yahweh our God, who has given us Messiah our King. For the sake of our Master Yeshua and his merit and virtues, may the sayings of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be favorable before you, O Lord, my rock and my Redeemer. Amen. Avinu Shabashamayim Yitkadesh Shemcha. Tavo Mehutecha Yesa retzanecha. Ba'aretz ka'asher na'asa v'shemayim. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Let thy kingdom come, let thy will be done, as on earth, so as in heaven. Ten lanu hayom, lachem hukenu. Usalach lanu et ashmatenu ka'asher. Solechim anachnu la'asher ashmulanu. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Ve'al tevienu lidei masa, ki im hatzilenu min hara. Ki lacha, hamamlacha, wahagavora, wahatifaret, le'olame olamim. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. None can compare to you, O Yahweh, and nothing compares to your creation. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. Your mercy endures throughout all generations. Yahweh is king. Yahweh was king. Yahweh shall be king throughout all time. May Yahweh grant his people mercy. May Yahweh bless his people with peace. Proclaim Yahweh's greatness with me. Let us exalt him together. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forth, Moses would say, Arise, O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel. All right, and tonight's Torah portion is going to be Genesis chapter 42, verse 18 through chapter 43, verse 23. And like always, we'll give you just a few moments to find that in your preferred translation if you would like to read along with us at home. Genesis chapter 42, verse 18 through chapter 43, verse 23. Now Joseph said to them the third day, Do this and live, for I fear Elohim. If you are trustworthy, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, and you, go, bring grain for the scarcity of food of your houses. And bring your youngest brother to me, and let your words be confirmed, and you do not die. And so they did. And they said to each other, Truly, we are guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the distress of his life when he pleaded with us, yet we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. And see, his blood is now required of us. And they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept, but came back to them and spoke to them. And he took Shimon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph commanded, and they filled their sacks with grain, also to put back every man's silver to his sack, and to give them food for the journey. And thus it was done for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and went from there. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his silver, for there it was in the mouth of his sack. And he said to his brothers, My silver has been returned, and there it is in my sack. And their hearts sank, and they were afraid, saying to each other, What is this that Elohim has done to us? So they came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, and reported to him all that befell them, saying, The man, the master of the land, spoke to us harshly, and took us for spies of the land. But we said to him, We are trustworthy, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is today with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the master of the land, said to us, By this I know that you are trustworthy. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for the scarcity of food of your households, and go. and bring your youngest brother to me. Then I know that you are not spies, but that you are trustworthy. I give your brother to you, and you move about in the land." And it came to be, as they emptied their sacks, that look, the bundle of each man's silver was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of silver, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, and Shimon is no more, and you would take Benjamin. All this is against me." So Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Take the lives of my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I bring him back to you." But he said, "My son is not going down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any harm should come to him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to Sheol." But the scarcity of food was severe in the land, and it came to be, when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Mitzrayim, that their father said to them, "Go back, buy us a little food." But Judah spoke to him, saying, "The man vehemently warned us, saying, 'You do not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you let our brother go with us, we go down and buy you food. But if you do not let him go, we do not go down, because the man said to us, You do not see my face unless your brother is with you.' And Yisrael said, 'Why do you do evil to me to inform the man that you still had another brother?' And they said, 'The man kept asking about us and our relatives, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' And we informed him according to these words. How could we know that he would say, Bring your brother down?' And Yehudah said to Yisrael his father, Send the boy with me, and let us arise and go, and live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself shall stand guarantee for him. From my hand you are to require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not delayed, truly by now we could have returned this second time." And their father Yisrael said to them, "If so, then do this. Take some of the best fruit of the land in your vessels, and bring a present down for the man, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds, and take double silver in your hand, and take back in your hand the silver that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. It could have been a mistake. And take your brother, and arise, go back to the man. And El Shaddai give to you compassion before the man, so that he shall release your other brother and Benjamin. And I, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." And the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double the amount of silver in their hand, and arose and went down to Mitzrayim, and stood before Joseph. And Joseph saw Benjamin with them, and said to the one over his house, "Bring the men home, and make a great slaughter, and prepare, for these men are to eat with me at noon." And the men did as Joseph said, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, "It is because of the silver which was put back into our sacks the first time that we are brought in, to throw himself upon us and fall upon us to take us as slaves, our donkeys too." So they came near to the man over the house of Joseph, and spoke to him at the door of the house, and said, "O my master, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. But it came to be, when we came to the lodging place, that we opened our sacks and saw each man's silver in the mouth of his sack, our silver in its weight. And we have brought it back in our hand, and we have brought down the other silver in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our silver in our sacks." But he said, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your Elohim and the Elohim of your fathers has given you treasure in your sacks. Your silver had come to me." And he brought Shimon out to them. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chaye olam betukenu, Baruch atah Yahweh, noten ha-Torah. Amen. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with Yahweh's command by the hand of Moses. It is a tree of life to those who take hold of it, and those who support it are praiseworthy. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Bring us back, Lord, to you, and we shall come. Renew our days as of old. Etayim hi lamahazim kimba vetomeheha meushar deraheha darhenoam v'chol nativoteha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai Elehawe Nashuva Hadesh Hadesh Amenu Hadesh Amenu Kekedem. Blessed are you, O Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has chosen faithful prophets to speak words of truth. Amen. And tonight's Haftorah portion is going to be Isaiah chapter 50, verse 10 through chapter 52, verse 11. And once again, we'll give you just a moment to find that in your preferred translation at home. Isaiah chapter 50, verse 10 through chapter 52, verse 11. Who among you is fearing Yahweh, obeying the voice of his servant that has walked in darkness and has no light? Let him trust in the name of Yahweh and lean upon his Elohim. See, all you who light a fire, girding on burning arrows, walk in the light of your fire and in the burning arrows you have lit. From my hand you shall have this, you shall lie down in grief. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, seeking Yahweh. Look to the rock you were hewn from, and to the hole of the pit you were dug from. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you. For he was alone when I called him, and I blessed him and increased him. For Yahweh shall comfort Zion, he shall comfort all her waste places. For he makes her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of Yahweh. Joy and gladness are found in it, thanksgiving and the voice of song. Listen to me, my people, and give ear to me, O my nation, for the Torah goes forth from me, and my right ruling I set as a light to peoples. My righteousness is near, my deliverance shall go forth, and my arms judge peoples. Coastlands wait upon me, and for my arm they wait expectantly. Lift up your eyes to the heavens, and look on the earth beneath. For the heavens shall vanish like smoke, and the earth wear out like a garment, and those who dwell in it die as gnats. But my deliverance is forever, and my righteousness is not broken. Listen to me, you who know righteousness, a people in whose heart is my Torah. Do not fear the reproach of men, nor be afraid of their revelings. For a moth eats them like a garment, and a worm eats them like wool. But my righteousness is forever, and my deliverance to all generations. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of Yahweh. Awake as in days of old, everlasting generations. Was it not you who cut Rahab apart and pierced the crocodile? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over? And let the ransomed of Yahweh return, and they shall come to Zion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. Let them attain joy and gladness, sorrow and sighing shall flee away. I am he who comforts you. Who are you that you should be afraid of man that dies, and of the Son of Man who is made like grass? And you have forgotten Yahweh your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth, and you continually fear all the day because of the rage of the oppressor, as he has prepared to destroy. And where is the rage of the oppressor? Bowed, he hastens to be loosened, that he should not die in the pit. and that his bread should not fail. But I am Yahweh your Elohim, stirring up the sea, and its waves roar. Yahweh of hosts is his name, and I have put my words in your mouth, and with the shadow of my hand I have covered you, to plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth, and to say to Zion, You are my people. Awake, awake yourself. Rise up, O Jerusalem, you who have drunk at the hand of Yahweh the cup of his wrath. You have drunk the dregs of the cup of reeling, and drained it out. Of all the sons she bore, she has none to guide her, and of all the sons she has brought up, none is strengthening her hand. Both these are coming upon you. Who is sorry for you? Ruin and destruction, scarcity of food and sword. How shall I comfort you? Your sons have fainted, they lie at the head of all the streets like a gazelle in a net. They are filled with the wrath of Yahweh, the rebuke of your Elohim. Therefore, please hear this, you afflicted and drunk, but not with wine. Thus said your master Yahweh and your Elohim, who pleads the cause of his people. See, I shall take out of your hand the cup of reeling, the dregs of the cup of my wrath. Never again shall you drink it. And I shall put it into the hand of those who afflict you, who have said to your being, Bow down, and we pass over you. And you made your back like the ground, and as the street to walk over. Awake, awake, put on your strength, O Zion. Put on your garments of splendor, O Jerusalem, the set-apart city. For no more do the uncircumcised and the unclean come in to you. Shake yourself from the dust, arise and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose yourself from the bonds of your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. For thus said Yahweh, You have been sold for naught, and you are redeemed not with silver. For thus said the Master Yahweh, At first my people went down into Mitzrayim to sojourn there, and Ashur oppressed them without cause. And now what have I here, declares Yahweh, that my people are taken away for naught. Those who rule over them make them wail, declares Yahweh, and my name is despised all day continually. Therefore my people shall know my name in that day, for I am the one who is speaking. See, it is I. How pleasant upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who proclaims peace, who brings good news, who proclaims deliverance, who says to Zion, Your Elohim reigns. The voice of your watchmen, they shall lift up their voices, together they shout for joy, because eye to eye they see the return of Yahweh to Zion. Break forth into joy, sing together, you waste places of Jerusalem, for Yahweh shall comfort his people, he shall redeem Jerusalem. Yahweh shall lay bare his set-apart arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the deliverance of our Elohim. Turn aside, come out from there, touch not the unclean. Come out of her midst, be clean, you who bear the vessels of Yahweh. Blessed are you, O Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has given us the living word in Messiah Yeshua. Blessed are you, O Yahweh, giver of the renewed covenant. Amen. And finally, tonight's Brit Hadashah portion is going to be Revelation chapter 21, verses 9 through 27. And one last time, we'll give you just a moment to find that in your preferred translation at home. Luke chapter 9, verses 46 through 48. And one of the 7 messengers who held the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and spoke to me, saying, Come, I shall show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the set-apart Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven from Elohim, having the esteem of Elohim, and her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and having a great and high wall, having 12 gates, and at the gates 12 messengers, and names written on them, which are those of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 emissaries of the Lamb. And he who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod to measure the city, and its gates, and its wall. And the city lies 4-cornered, and its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the rod 12,000 stadia. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured its wall 144 forearms, according to the measure of a man, that is, of a messenger. And the structure of its wall was jasper, and the city was clean gold like clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation, jasper; the second, sapphire; the third, agate; the fourth, emerald; the fifth, sardonyx; the sixth, ruby; the seventh, chrysolite; the eighth, beryl; the ninth, topaz; the 10th, chrysoprase; the 11th, jacinth; and the 12th, amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each one of the gates was a single pearl. And the street of the city was clean gold, like transparent glass. And I saw no dwelling place in it, for Yahweh El Shaddai is its dwelling place, and the Lamb. And the city had no need of the sun nor of the moon to shine in it, for the esteem of Elohim lightened it, and the Lamb is its lamp. And the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the sovereigns of the earth bring their esteem into it. And its gates shall not be shut at all by day, for night shall not be there, and they shall bring the esteem and the appreciation of the nations into it. And there shall by no means enter into it whatever is unclean, neither anyone doing abomination and falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu hadavar haemet v'chaye olam betukenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten habrit hahadashah. Blessed are you, O Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who gave to us the word of truth and planted life everlasting in our midst. Blessed are you, O Yahweh, giver of the renewed covenant. Amen. All right, so in just a moment, we'll be getting to tonight's drosh, but like always, we're going to take just a short break, check on our various live streams, and make sure everything is still going good electronically the way it's supposed to go, because that doesn't always happen sometimes. So let's take a quick moment to check on that. While we're doing that, feel free to go grab a snack or a drink before we get into this, and make sure definitely to have your notes ready, because we're going to be getting into a whole bunch of stuff just in the drosh itself, and there's more than that can go into it. Also, we're going to be checking our live streams, and if you're not familiar with the way we do things, we live stream to 2 different streaming services every single Friday night, and that is YouTube and Rumble. So if one of those doesn't work for you, go check out the other one. But if you like both of them, you can always go to our website at godhonesttruth.com. Click on the live stream button from the navigation bar, and you'll be able to see both the Rumble stream and the YouTube stream on one particular page, or one specific page rather. You can also click on the post for the particular night's drosh. In this instance, it's the slavery overview, and that'll take you to the article page for the episode, where it has the live stream there on it as well. Now, before we get started, if you would, go down below and in the comments section, tell us, you already know pretty much, if you're an American anyways, you know the general overview and the general statement about slavery. But if otherwise, go down below and let us know someone else besides the Bible who practiced slavery and what kind of slavery it was, if you know the nuanced type or form of slavery. Let us know about that down in the comments if you happen to know anything at all about slavery. And then after you get done with that, make sure to go up and click on that subscribe button, Ring the bell so that you're notified every time we go live or upload a new on-demand video. Also hit that like button and hit that share button and share this content around with someone that you may know, because odds are definitely if you're watching this, someone in your circle is going to like this same kind of content. So go ahead, click that share button and share it around through email, through social media, through text message, or what have you. But every time you share the word by word of mouth about God Honest Truth Ministries, we really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. Hope you got your notes ready, because there's a lot coming to you, and it's going to be a general overview. But before we get into all that, I do want to let everyone know that this series is going to be an overview. I'm sorry, this particular video is going to be an overview leading up to our detailed and specific video and teaching next week about slavery in the Bible. Now, what we present to you here in this video is not going to be even a drop in the bucket as it pertains to the information that is out there regarding slavery in history, and also the amount of information that we collected ourselves. And if you'd like to see more about that, you can go to our website at godhonesttruth.com, click on the post for this particular episode, and you'll be directed to the article page where you'll be able to find the on-demand video that you see here if you're watching on a video platform. You'll also be able to find the drosh slides that you see on the video, and you can go through those drosh slides at your own pace, which is very convenient for study time. Down below that, you'll also be able to see the notes that we took for this particular episode and also for next episode. We put them all in one notes file. So it's 23 pages right now, and it's going to grow. But there's so much more information in that notes file that we put together for you free of charge than we could put together here and still have it in a reasonable length of time. Also, on that article page, we'll have the transcript when it becomes available, if that is so of benefit to you. So, a lot of information, a lot of stuff there to help you out. So go check it out today at godhonesttruth.com, or go down below in the description, and we have provided a clear and convenient link for you to that article post. All you gotta do is click on it, and it'll take you directly to that article post on our website. And that should be down there in the description, whether you're watching on a video platform or an audio podcasting platform. So go down there, click on it, and check it out today. Now, before we get into the main meat of this particular video or teaching, let's go over some basic housekeeping, some things I want to bring up first before we get into that. Number one, this is going to step on some toes, especially some American toes. And yeah, it's probably just some first world problems, but there's a particular narrative regarding slavery out there that a lot of people have bought into, a lot of rewriting of history. In this particular episode, though it's not an in-depth and exhaustive teaching on slavery itself, it's still going to step on some toes. So if you are thin-skinned and you only want your particular narrative, you know where the off button is. Thank you for joining us. But for the rest of you, thank you for staying. Let's go on. This is definitely not going to be the end-all and be-all of what slavery is, or even everything about slavery itself. So with that being said, I am no... how should you say this? I have not dedicated my life to the study and examination of slavery, the subject of slavery. So I'm open to being corrected if I get something wrong. And please, by all means, feel free to let me know down in the comments, or write to us at team@godhonesttruth.com and let us know so we can get that corrected. But like I said, I am definitely open to being corrected or educated on any particular point that may come up tonight, if it so happens to be an error. Please, by all means, let us know. Let's go over the point of this whole series in general. It's going to be 2 videos tonight and next week. But the point of this series in general is because slavery in the Bible is rarely, if ever, talked about. And as a result, the topic of slavery within the Bible is not understood, or is severely misunderstood, especially by those who do away with the Tanakh, the aka Old Testament. They don't understand anything in there. They only understand bits and pieces about the New Testament. And when it comes to these more in-depth things like slavery, they have little to no understanding. And those who do, a lot of times they have misunderstanding. So This is to help correct that aspect of the Bible and slavery in general. Now, the point of this particular video is to give a more accurate of slavery in general throughout history, because there are, in just a secular part or the aspect of things, slavery in general is misunderstood sometimes, and hopefully we can set some things straight through this particular video. And without an accurate understanding of slavery in general, an understanding of slavery in the Bible will be even more difficult. When you think that all slavery is the same thing, it's not. We're going to get into the forms and types here in a moment, and you'll see that, well, I won't spoil anything. We'll get into it in just a moment. But slavery is often way misunderstood by the public. So hopefully this will, if it's something that interests you, hopefully this will spark a fire in you to go further and study any particular aspect of slavery for yourself. And if not, then hopefully this information will at least help put out some truth and some correct information so that you will be better educated for discussions in the future. Slavery is oftentimes presented in a biased manner, and I'm not speaking for any other country or culture around the world. This is coming from an American point of view. A lot of times, slavery is presented in a biased manner, and that's just not something it should be. Slavery should be presented in a holistic and complete manner, not just presented, how should I say this? Slavery should not just be presented as something that happened at a particular point in time by a particular country or culture and just to a particular group. You'll understand why in just a moment, but that is a biased way of putting it, and we should not teach and understand slavery in a biased manner. We should understand it in a holistic manner, as all-encompassing. And it's a big subject. It really is. There's a lot of information to know and learn about it. So it's really hard sometimes, and that's why we're only doing an overview of slavery in general tonight. But hopefully this will help offset some of that bias that tends to happen, especially here in the American narrative of slavery a lot of times. And also, this is not an attempt to minimize any atrocities that may have occurred, regardless of what point in history that they occurred, regardless of which society or culture they occurred in. And it's also not an attempt to minimize any atrocities, regardless of what race these atrocities occurred towards. As you can see, it's more widespread than some people think, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, before we get into the deeper subject and overall, let's go over a term titled conflation. It's actually an actual term, conflate something. But what does it mean to conflate something? Well, according to Merriam-Webster.com, conflate means to bring together or blend or confuse. It also means to combine things such as two versions of a text into a composite whole. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, conflate means to bring together, meld, or fuse, to combine two variant texts, for example, into one whole, or to fail to distinguish between or confuse. And this is something we should not, and this is not good to conflate various subjects and ideas, especially when it comes to something as serious as this subject of slavery. We'll get into what I mean here in just a moment. Just gives you some examples. When you conflate something, it means you mix or combine these different ideas, concepts, or pieces of information into a single whole, often in a way that blurs their distinctions or treats them as identical, even when they are not. It's taking two different things and making them seem as though they are part and parcel and cannot be separated, and they're always been together and they're always one and the same thing. And this is not true. That's called conflating. It's like blending two separate things so thoroughly that you can't easily tell where one ends and the other begins, even if they should be kept separate. Let's go over some examples so you can understand what conflate means a little bit better. Number one, it's probably something we've all experienced or even done ourselves, conflating a person's net worth with their character. For example, someone might conflate wealth with goodness, or assuming that because a person is rich, they must also be a good or moral person, even though these are distinct qualities. Someone's wealth or even appearance of wealth is different than the kind of person they are. And also, you shouldn't conflate the image of wealth with actual wealth. I've learned this from Dave Ramsey. Just because they look like they've got it all together and they are rich and stuff like that, it's just another loan sometimes. And they could be swimming in debt over their eyeballs. So don't conflate a person's net worth with their character, and definitely don't conflate the image that someone portrays as to what's actually going on behind the scenes. It's not always the same thing. Another example, conflating a brand name with the product itself. I do this so many times, and so many people do this as well. But many people conflate things like Kleenex with all facial tissues, or Band-Aid with all adhesive bandages, even though these are the specific brand names for a general product. I do the same thing. I do that very thing right there where I say Kleenex, even though it's generic from the local grocery store, or Weed Eater or something like that. But yeah, that's an example of conflating. There's another American thing here too, but news outlets sometimes conflate protest and riot, blurring the line between peaceful demonstration and violent behavior, which affects public perception. And it really does. If whatever's going on is on the side of that particular news outlet, they call it a peaceful protest, even though it's actually a violent riot. And anyways, won't get off on a tangent. I wish they would just report it accurately, but hey, that's another subject for another day and not the scope of this video. But yeah, there's another example of conflate. Another example, someone might conflate socialism with communism, using the words as if they mean the exact same thing, when in fact they are different political systems with different histories and practices. I personally do this a lot, and unfortunately I still do this, and I really shouldn't. Socialism and communism are two different things. Now, both lead to loss of freedom, both lead to massive death, but they are two different things. People often conflate law in scripture with man-made traditions. We've all experienced this, those of us in the messianic way of thinking, but they treat both law and man-made traditions as both of them as burdens, when in truth, Yahweh's Torah is righteousness, while man's additions are what Yeshua rebuked. And that is so true. And truth be known, Torah is not actually law. It doesn't actually mean law. Torah is more akin to instruction instead of law. And a person may conflate the American Civil War with the fight against slavery, forgetting that not all Union states opposed slavery and not all Confederate soldiers owned slaves. And the emancipation, which set enslaved people free here in America, did not happen until halfway through the Civil War. It was 2 years into the war before they put out the Emancipation Proclamation. So don't conflate the Civil War in America with the fight against slavery, because it's not. Now, one of the good things and positive things that came out of the Civil War was the end of slavery, but it did not start because of slavery. And to conflate is not always bad. It's not always done with bad intent anyways. It can happen by accident. We all do this. I myself am definitely guilty. But when done knowingly, and the two things should be separated, it can becomes a tool of manipulation, fogging up truth by blending falsehood with fact. We saw that in the example of the news outlets calling a violent riot something like a peaceful protest, right? That can be a tool of manipulation. And in that example, they really do use it as a tool of manipulation, and they blend falsehood with fact. Now, to get more on point towards tonight's particular subject, the word slavery from Merriam-Webster.com. Slavery, the state of a person who is forced, usually under threat of violence, to labor for the profit of another. A situation or practice in which people are coerced to work under conditions that are exploitative. Or number two, submission to a dominating influence. So that is slavery. Now, let's look at the definition according to Merriam-Webster for racism. 1, a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Also, behavior attitudes that reflect and foster this belief, racial discrimination, or prejudice. 2A, the systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another specifically. Or 2B, a political or social system founded on racism and designed to execute its principles. Here's something, again, I'm only speaking from the American perspective, but a lot of times the narrative here in America goes that slavery is racist. And that's not true. That's a conflation, thinking that slavery and racism are intertwined when they are not. And you'll see that as we come up here and look at the further information in this particular episode. Slavery and racism are two different things. Now, they were intertwined here in America and through the transatlantic slave trade, but they are not one and the same thing, and we should not conflate them as such. So let that be known that slavery and racism are two different things that should be kept apart. In fact, throughout most of history, a lot of particular cultures and civilizations enslaved their own people. I mean, they would come down to being enslaved because they were in debt, because they were taken by a neighboring tribe who were of the same ethnicity or same race, but it wasn't about racism. That didn't happen until later on, and yeah, we'll get into that in just a moment. But anyways, let's look at some types or some forms of slavery, because this is where it begins to get really nuanced. When people talk about slavery, are they meaning what kind of slavery? Slavery in general can encompass a whole lot of things. And this is something that really opened my eyes when I started doing this research into this particular subject. This a lot more nuanced and a lot more in depth than what we can get into here on one particular episode. So once again, like always, and especially this time, I invite everyone out there to go farther than what you get in this video and do your own research, do as much as possible to your own satisfaction. There's a lot more information that goes into this. This is just a kicking off point. So number one, the first type of slavery that we're going to look at is called chattel slavery. And this is probably the most common that people refer to when they talk about slavery in general. But chattel slavery, it is people are treated as personal property or chattel, excuse me, to be bought, sold, inherited, or punished without legal rights. This is the most recognized form of slavery in the Western world. The most absolute form, a human reduced to property. They may be bought, sold, inherited, stripped of personhood. Their children follow their fate found in antiquity and in the American South until abolition. Now, this is something as a little bit of a tangent. When I look at property here, especially like land and houses, stuff like that, they always call it like real property. I've always wondered what's the fake property that they're actually talking about. But no, the opposite of real property, meaning something that can't be moved, like a house or a land, something like that in general. That's what real property is. The opposite of that nowadays is referred to as personal property, both tangible and intangible. A personal property can also go by the name chattel, meaning movable property. Things like cars, clothing, computers, stuff like that. Just a little bit of a tangent. I thought it was interesting myself, but anyways. Some examples of chattel slavery is the transatlantic slave trade, which we're all probably familiar with and probably learned about in school. Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas and enslaved on plantations. Now, that's not completely true, because it was also to England, it was also to Europe, various places, not just the Americas. Ancient Rome and Greece, big time into slavery and chattel slavery. They enslaved war captives and they enslaved criminals, and they were used for labor, entertainment, meaning gladiators fighting to the death. Even the women had other services that they would be used for in slavery, and they were used for domestic service as well in Rome and Greece. Even some of the men were used for those other services sometimes. We'll see that in just a moment. But chattel slavery persisted longest in the Middle East, with trans-Saharan, Indian Ocean, and Red Sea slave trades continuing to traffic slaves from Africa until the 1960s in some Arabian Peninsula countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Yemen, which finally outlawed it in 1962, Dubai, who finally outlawed it in 1963, and Oman, who finally outlawed it in 1970. And just because various countries have outlawed slavery does not mean it's been done away with. We'll just put it like that. More information on that coming up. Another type of slavery that we're going to talk about is debt slavery, also called debt bondage or peonage, like peon, right? This is where individuals pledge themselves against a loan, often with no realistic way to repay it, resulting in indefinite servitude. Occurs when individuals are forced to work to repay a loan or when they inherit a debt from a relative, all depending on the culture and society they're coming from. This happened in places like South Asia, India, Nepal, where generational debt bondage in agriculture and brick kilns in medieval Europe, in ancient Greece and Athens, in addition to the chattel slavery. And this debt bondage happened until Solon's reforms saw peasants enslaved by unpaid debts. Ancient Near East and Mesopotamia, these laws allowed 3-year service for debtors, then release, but abuses still occurred. Didn't always release them. They held on to those slaves. This debt slavery existed in ancient societies, including pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, where people unable to pay debts could be sentenced to work as slaves until the debts were cleared. So this type of slavery was, it's not exactly like the previous form, but it is also a form of slavery. And, well, slavery is slavery, in my opinion. Contract slavery. This is something we've probably all heard about, and not to give anything away, but keep this particular one in mind. Contract slavery or indentured servitude, a contractual deal offered often for passage, work, or benefit that hides coercion. Contracts give a facade of legality, but in reality, the person is trapped, often unpaid, with no freedom to leave. Things like this happened with the British colonial indentured servants when people were trying to get over here. They didn't have their own personal ships. They had to hire passage, and that was expensive. So they sold themselves into slavery, into indentured servitude. These indentured servants in North America who signed passage served 4 to 7 years after they got here to the colonies. Some endured abuse, non-payment, even sale of their contracts. So it wasn't technically sale of the person who was sell the contract, which means the person went with the contract. So I don't really see the difference. Maybe there's a making a distinction without a difference, but anyways. Also, the modern forms in Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent were workers deceived with contracts and then forced into labor. The sad reality of the fact is that slavery is still going on in these various forms, even in 2025. It's not been done away with. That's something that you need to know and understand. It wasn't done away with 200 years ago. It's still going on today. Then we all have another type or form called serfdom or bind the land labor. This is where the people have more rights than a slave, but the serfs can't be sold separately. They stay with the land. They're tied both to the land and the lord, the land or the lord of the land, the landlord. They owe labor, rent, and obedience, but maintain personhood and limited mobility. So even if the current lord of that land sells the land, they're not really selling the people, but the people go with the land, and therefore they've got a new lord, whoever buys the land. So it's almost like a reverse chattel, but not really. I don't know. This happened in medieval Europe a lot. Serfs inherited status, and they were obliged to the manor, but had no rights to subsistent plots and limited legal claims. And it happened in Eastern Europe as well. The second serfdom persisted into the 19th century, sometimes nearing chattel status. So this got pretty severe Even though it's a bit nuanced and people want to call it different, it's still a form of slavery. So it's still slavery. Another type or form of slavery is forced labor, state, or war slavery. I'm sure you've probably all heard about this particular nuanced type of slavery. But this is where people are compelled to work under threat or coercion, often without pay or freedom to leave. Some examples of that is in Nazi Germany and also the Soviet gulags, where people were forced by the millions into brutal slave labor, and then they would oftentimes be killed afterwards or during the process because they worked too hard, things like that. But yeah, another modern example of slavery. Also, modern fishing, mining, and construction industries, especially in Southeast Asia and Africa. Ancient emperors conscripted war captives for public works. People like the Egyptians, the Babylonians, things like that, that built the pyramids, the roads, and the temples for that particular society. Contemporary, modern day, Myanmar and North Korea are reported to use civilians for forced labor under state control. Don't know much about Myanmar, but North Korea is bad news. And during all my research and going through all these various things, I saw that North Korea was probably the number one culprit in today's world for the slavery, still having slavery. And it's, anyways, we'll get into that. But yeah, North Korea, number one. Leave it there. Another type or form of slavery here, pawnship or panyarring. This happened pretty much all in West Africa, but this is unique to parts of Africa. Individuals or family members pledged as collateral for credit with kinship protections to limit sale. When debts went unpaid, seizure or panyarring sometimes escalated into enslavement. This happened with West African societies, of course, pre-colonial, and things kind of changed after the ships and Europeans got there, but it was pawnship among the Akan, Yoruba, and Igbo people, if I'm pronouncing those correctly. When creditors seized persons by force, it was known as panyarring, used to enforce repayment or even feed the Atlantic slave trade. So these West Africans, or especially West Africans, but others as well, when they would take people by force and they needed debt repaid, and they had someone captive, they would sell them as a slave into the transatlantic slave trade. So it wasn't just Europeans coming in and taking people by force. They were being sold by their fellow Africans a lot of times, because like in other parts of the world and other times in the world, Africa was a slave society, and lots of slave societies. Slavery was already established in Africa way before the Europeans got there. So it just kind of went hand in hand at that point. And pawnship or panyarring is one type or form of slavery that existed in Africa pre-Europeans. Another type or form is descent-based slavery. This is slavery inherited through birth. Individuals are born into a slave class. This happened a lot within the United States Southeast here. It happened also within Greece and Rome, places like that. But it wasn't because you were indebted to someone. It wasn't because you were a captive from war. It's just because you were born and your mother or your father was a slave, and therefore you were born as a slave as well. This happened in Mauritania until recently. Black Africans born into slavery under Arab Berber masters. West African kingdoms, things like Mali and Songhai, slavery was institutional and hereditary. So once you're in slavery, then your descendants are also in slavery as well. Another type or form of slavery is called child slavery. And this is the enslavement of children for labor, even military use, or sexual exploitation, as we've got, unfortunately, today with the human trafficking market. It's horrid, but yeah, it happens, and it still happens. For instance, we got particular parts of Africa where child soldiers are forced to fight, coerced into armed conflict by rebel groups. You probably heard various things on the news about such things. There's also child labor in cocoa and textile industries, especially in West Africa and South Asia. Also down in South America and various places like that that do cocaine or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, child slavery and child labor, forced child labor, is all over the place, even in today's day and age. We also have another type or form called domestic servitude. Don't take this too far. Don't confuse anything. Don't conflate it with other stuff. But the domestic servitude is where individuals work in private homes under coercion, often isolated and abused. I could make a joke right there, but let's stay serious for this particular teaching. Yeah. Anyway, domestic servitude is where individuals work in private homes under coercion. They're forced to. They're often isolated and abused. This happens in modern Gulf states, where migrant domestic workers face restrictions and abuse under the kafala system. And some historical examples is you see the household slaves in ancient China and Egypt. Think Joseph when he went to work for Potiphar. He was a domestic servant. He was a household slave. He was sold in slavery by his brothers. So this is one example you can see from scripture already. Joseph was a slave and he was a domestic slave to Potiphar. Going on, another form, in our last form we're going to cover here. This is military slavery. And this is when enslaved individuals are used as soldiers or military labor. This happened with the Ottoman Empire, especially with the Janissaries, who were supposed to be fairly renowned. They took Christian boys and trained them as elite soldiers. The Islamic caliphates also did pretty much the same thing. They enslaved Africans and Turks, and they used them in military campaigns and kept their own people from dying. It's another form of slavery. The Islamic world with the Mamluks, meaning one who is owned, were purchased as young boys, often from Christian territories, and they were trained as elite warriors, just like the Ottoman Empire did with the Janissaries. But these Mamluks, their status was above ordinary slaves, and they received rigorous training in martial arts, Islamic sciences, and court etiquette. So it sounds like they were well taken care of, but in reality, they were still slaves, and they were military slaves at that. Going on, ancient Rome used military slaves. After a defeat in 216 of BCE, Rome enlisted 8,000 young slaves into the army, known as voluntari or volones, promising them freedom for service. Slaves were generally present throughout Roman society, including military contacts. Slaves were something big within ancient Rome. It was huge practice. But the U.S. Army in the 19th century, and this is pre-Civil War, but the U.S. Army functioned as a slaveholding institution itself, with thousands of enslaved people serving as officers' servants. And this happened even in the free states in the North. If you were a military officer from the North, you were from a free state, more than likely you still had a servant serving you, a black servant serving you, taking care of prepping your uniform or whatever. It's like a squire from medieval Europe. But yeah, the U.S. Army functioned as a slaveholding institution as well. There were also what's known as comfort women during World War II. And this gets, if slavery is not dark enough, it gets even darker. During World War II, Imperial Japan organized a governmental system of comfort women, mostly Korean, Chinese, and Filipino women who were forced into sexual slavery for Japanese soldiers. And yeah, that's bad, but it wasn't just the Japanese that done this. There's also others as well. But yeah, this whole military slavery, and this is sexual slavery as well, but it all kind of blends into one. And like I said before, slavery is slavery, no matter what nuanced title or label you give it. Chattel slavery, indentured servitude, military slavery, child slavery, it's all slavery. Now, decide for yourself if all forms and types of slavery are bad or not. Don't go off it yet. Wait till we hear the information from next week about the Bible, but we'll get into that next week. Now, let's get into some history and the human habit of harnessing. Go over some various civilizations, some various points in history, and look at the undisputable fact that slavery has happened throughout history and has happened throughout the world in just about every single culture and civilization on Earth. In fact, slavery has been around in various cultures in history much, much longer than a history of non-slavery has. Like I said, it's still going on today. But going back all the way to the time of Mesopotamia, looking at the Code of Hammurabi. And here, the Code of Hammurabi from Wikipedia.org, it states, the Code of Hammurabi is a Babylonian legal text composed during 1755 to 1750 BC. It is the longest, best organized, and best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. It is written in the Old Babylonian dialect of Akkadian, purportedly by Hammurabi, 6th king of the first dynasty of Babylon. And I invite you to go look through this yourself. It's very, very interesting the way they thought back then. And as you read through some of these laws in the Code of Hammurabi, there's a bunch of them. But you'll see various things there. They make a distinction between male and female, obviously. Most everyone does. But you also see about 4 different types of people that's mentioned there. You got the royals, you got the man, you got the free man, and then you got the slave. Royal is pretty self-explanatory. I'm thinking the man is a regular non-slave citizen. The free man, if I'm reading it correctly, free man is a former slave who has been freed. And then a slave, obviously, is the slave in the particular situation. But here, there's a whole bunch of laws in the Code of Hammurabi about slaves. And here on your screen, I've actually listed off just a few of those. Here in law number 15, if a man aid a male or female slave of the palace or a male or female slave of a free man to escape from the city gate, he shall be put to death. So apparently in the Code of Hammurabi, you cannot aid slaves going away. That's a death penalty. And Code 199, if one destroys the eye of a man's slave or break a bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of his price. And if you read the surrounding laws that go with that, if it does the same thing to a free man, the punishment is a lot different. And then finally, 205, if a man's slave strikes a man's son, they shall cut off his ear. If you read through that, you'll see various laws pertaining to different things, but especially with slaves and citizens, things like that, the differences are stark. Slaves are treated a whole lot differently than the regular citizens or free men. But this is the Mesopotamia. They had slaves and they had codes and laws for slaves even way back then. Went on to ancient Egypt, and ancient Egypt have slaves, obviously, but it wasn't just back in the Bible times. It was all throughout history. But anyways, from wikipedia.org, quote, slavery in ancient Egypt existed at least since the Old Kingdom period. There were 3 types of enslavement in ancient Egypt: chattel slavery, bonded labor, and forced labor. Egypt's labor culture encompassed many people of various social ranks, end quote. And this is something I learned also, that the pyramids were not built by slaves. They were actually built by workers who got paid. So probably not much, probably like corvée labor. Corvée is another type or form of slavery. But anyways, going on, looking at slavery in Egypt from wikipedia.org, quote, Egyptian slaves, specifically during the New Kingdom era, originated from foreign lands. The slaves themselves were seen as an accomplishment to Egyptian king's reign and a sign of power. Slaves or bak were seen as property or a commodity to be bought and sold. Their human qualities were disregarded and were merely seen as property to be used for a master's labor. Unlike the more modern term serf, Egyptian slaves were not tied to the land. The owners could use the slave for various occupational purposes. The slaves could serve towards the productivity of the region and community. Slaves were generally men, but women and families could be forced into the owner's household service. So yeah, obviously ancient Egypt had slaves because we read that in the Bible, but just want to put it out there, some more information about slavery in Egypt. Moving on into Greece from crunchlearning.com. Quote, in ancient Greece, there were two main types of slaves, chattel slaves and state-owned slaves. Chattel slaves were owned by individuals who had complete control over their lives, including their work and living conditions. State-owned slaves were owned by the state and were used to work in mines, perform public works, or serve in the army, end quote. So you got the military slavery, as well as the forced labor slavery. So, and the chattel slavery. So it's all there, even in ancient Greece. And it gets even worse. Check this out from historyextra.com. Quote, treating other humans as property was part and parcel of Greek life, with enslaved people used across virtually all areas of society. Enslaved people were an integral part of society in ancient Greece. Even Aristotle, arguably one of Athens' most progressive thinkers, referred to enslaved people as katema impsukon, a phrase that roughly translates as animate property or property that breathes. Many enslaved people were foreigners who had been captured during wars. The sons of defeated enemies might also be forced into slavehood, sometimes ending up serving the clients of male brothels. End quote. And take that into account. Wow. The Greeks were messed up. I'll just leave it there. Yeah, they were very messed up. That last quote right there says some of these boys and men that were captured, they were a defeated enemy when they went to war and they got defeated and the Greeks took them captive. They would be forced into serving at the male brothels. As far as I'm going with that, you probably already picked up on it. But then moving into Rome. Rome had slaves and all across the empire and all throughout their history. Slavery was something big and a big part of Rome itself. But from worldhistory.org, quote, slavery was an ever-present feature of the Roman world. Slaves served in households, agriculture, mines, the military workshops, construction, and many services. As many as 1 in 3 of the population in Italy or 1 in 5 across the empire were slaves. Slavery, that is complete mastery or dominium of one individual over another, was so embedded in Roman culture that slaves became almost invisible, and there was certainly no feeling of injustice in this situation on the part of the rulers, end quote. And you've probably seen that old Charlton Heston movie of Spartacus, right? And that was about Roman slavery, and Spartacus actually did exist, and there was an actual slave revolt led by Spartacus in Rome. But yeah, Roman slavery, that was something, slaves were a big part of Roman society, and they would serve even prestigious jobs sometimes as doctors or as bookkeepers or as government workers, things like that. And sometimes as a slave in Roman society, you could even live better than some of these citizens. You definitely didn't have all the rights that the Roman citizen did, but you wouldn't a lot of times worry about where your next meal is coming from or whatnot. So yeah, slavery was big within ancient Rome. Africa, and then we'll talk about Africa. Africa is a continent, just to remind you, it's not a country. So not every country in Africa is the same as every other country. But talking about the continent of Africa and slavery from ourhistory.org.uk. Quote, many African societies practiced forms of slavery that varied greatly in terms of their nature and impact. Slavery was a deeply ingrained part of many African cultures. In some regions, slaves were integrated into households and communities, acquiring certain rights and even pathways to freedom. Slavery often resulted from local conflicts, raids, and warfare where prisoners of war were enslaved. Additionally, people could become slaves due to debt, punishment for crimes, or kidnappings. Many African kingdoms and leaders engaged in the transatlantic slave trade, trading captured individuals for European goods such as firearms, alcohol, and textiles. End quote. And then from Africa.businessinsider.com, quote, in the 21st century, the word slavery may seem distant. However, the unpleasant reality is that slavery is still in existence all across the world, and Africa is no exception. The pervasive existence of contemporary slavery in Africa is exacerbated by systemic failings in governance and law enforcement. Weak legal frameworks, corruption, and insufficient resources all impede attempts to eliminate slavery effectively, end quote. So, like we said earlier, something that this is to go against the American narrative a lot of times, but in Africa, slavery was already ingrained and established as part of African culture even before the Europeans got there. And unfortunately, slavery is still going on in Africa to this day, according to Business Insider. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times those types of slavery are horrific conditions. They're traded as cattle or chattel. And a lot of times within the African slavery, the men would be killed because it was the men who, even though they could work good or work better in general, work better than women or children, the men were more often to fight back or run away or something like that. So they would more often just kill the men and keep the women and children. And this happened during the European times as well, when people were during the transatlantic slave trade. The Africans would trade other African males to the Europeans to be taken away. Instead of killing them, they would make money off of them. But a lot of times they would keep the women and children. But in a sense, that the males then would be kept alive, whereas if the Europeans hadn't been there, there would still be slavery and the men would have died. I am not going to call it a good thing. I'm not going to call it a positive thing. I'm just stating it for what it's worth. Traditional African slavery would kill the men, but once the Europeans arrived, they traded the males to the Europeans, take across the Atlantic, thereby keeping the males alive. But yeah, Africa, they had slavery before the Europeans came, and unfortunately, they are one of those parts of the world where they still have slavery going on. And it happens today more than just Africa. It happens in Asia, it happens all over the place, but it's still happening in Africa even to today. Now let's look at the Aztecs, because we've already looked at the Middle East with Greece and Rome, Mesopotamia, stuff like that. We've looked at Africa, Egypt, etc., etc. But what about the quote-unquote New World? Well, let's look at the Aztecs down in South America and Middle America, whatever you want to call it. But this comes from wikipedia.org, quote, slavery in the Aztec Empire and surrounding Mexica societies was widespread, with slaves known by the Nahuatl word Tlachtoltli. Slaves did not inherit their status. People were enslaved as a form of punishment after being captured in war or voluntary to pay off debts. A slave who was sold 3 times as incorrigible could be sold to be sacrificed. Those slaves commanded a premium in price. Anyone could be a slave, though commoners were more likely to enter slavery voluntarily. But because slaves were looked down upon, it was usually the last option one took to pay off a debt, end quote. And this is something that is fairly common within slave operating societies. When someone got into debt or they couldn't pay something off, they sold themselves voluntarily into slavery in order to pay off the debt. And it would only be for a certain time, generally. That was the idea. So that was something that was common throughout the world, not just the Aztecs. But for those of you who didn't know, the Aztecs were one of those people who also did human sacrifice, and slaves were a part of the human sacrifice as well. Then let's go back across the pond to look at the Vikings. Vikings were big into slavery as well. From thearchaeologist.org, quote, some historians now argue that the Vikings were responsible for more human trafficking in the period 750 to 1050 than any other civilization. Although slavery existed in some form in Scandinavia long before the Viking era, it was during this period that we saw a sharp uptake in the number of slaves. Viking raids, which remain infamous for their ferocity and scale, were significant sources of slaves. Monasteries, villages, and towns across Europe, particularly in the British, were favorite targets. Poverty or debt could push individuals into slavery, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Furthermore, the children of slaves were automatically considered slaves, perpetuating this cycle across generations. End quote. So here we got some more themes about what we've already looked at. We got people that could go into slavery voluntarily or be captured and taken against their will. And we've also got that descent-based slavery, where the children of slaves were automatically considered slaves themselves once they were born. So moving on, let's look at Asia now, the Asia region. From academic.oup.com, quote, the dynamics of the West African and wider Atlantic slave trade are not that different from what we encounter in the Indian Ocean and Indonesian archipelago worlds. Local inequalities, caste indebtedness, slave lineage, and conflicts, meaning warfare or punishment, were sources for an expanding long-distance slave trade in West Africa, as well as different parts of Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Western Indian Ocean. Many of these dynamics existed before the arrival of Europeans, end quote. And found this out during the research part of this particular exercise. But yeah, slavery existed for a long time in China itself, going way back in the day to various different kingdoms and dynasties that existed. And this, well, that's the whole point of what we're trying to tell you here, is that slavery is not just something that happened at a particular point in history, not just with a particular country or colony, and it didn't happen to just one particular group of people. It happened all over the world, all throughout history, and this is the point we're trying to get across here. But also from walkfree.org, quote, the 2023 Global Survey Index estimates that 5.8 million people were living in modern slavery in China on any given day in 2021. This equates to 4 in every 1,000 people in the country. It is second only to India when the estimated number of people living in modern slavery is considered, end quote. That's modern estimates about slavery. People who are living in modern slave conditions. 5.8 million people enslaved in China today. Let that sink in. Going on, coming back to the North Americas and looking at the Native Americans here in North America. From worldhistory.org, quote, excuse me. Slavery was practiced by the Native Americans before any Europeans arrived in the region. People of one tribe could be taken by another for a variety of reasons. This practice continued throughout the colonial era, aided and encouraged by Native American tribes themselves up through 1750. Each tribe understood itself as inherently superior to other tribes, and although they would form alliances for short periods in a common cause, or for longer periods as confederacies, they frequently warred with each other for goods, in the name of tribal honor and for captives, among other reasons. Men, women, and children taken captive were then enslaved by the victorious tribe, sometimes for life and other times for a given number of years, and in still other cases until they were adopted and became members of the tribe, end quote. So even here, before the colonies, before the arrival of the Europeans, there was slavery in North America. There was slavery in Central America. There was slavery in South America. There was slavery in Africa. There was slavery in India. There was slavery in China and Korea. There was slavery in Scandinavia. There was slavery in Europe. There was slavery in the Middle East. And this happened back in the thousands of years BCE, even the hundreds of years BCE, even the hundreds of years of the Common Era, all the way up through today. And even today, it's happened all throughout history. It's happened in just about every single culture and society on earth. Slavery is not something that just happened to one particular people at one particular point in time in one particular location or one particular country. No, this is way more widespread than any of that. And this hopefully has opened your eyes to help you come to a better understanding of a general overview of slavery and the occurrences of slavery. That's a little bit about slavery around the world, throughout history and stuff like that. And we also went over various types of slavery as well, all in a effort to better prepare you for next week's teaching on slavery in the Bible and going over actual scriptures, early writers, early Christian writers that would reference this subject, all to get you ready for that. So hopefully that's opened up some eyes. Hopefully that's gave you some information. And if it's piqued an interest in you, definitely I encourage you, go farther in your studies, do your own research, learn more. And if you find anything out, let us know. Write us an email. Let us know what you found out. Once again, there's so much more in the notes that we didn't include or could not include in this particular teaching. So go check it out on our website. And like always, go farther in your studies on your own even. So in summary, just to recap what we have covered, and it's really has been a lot, and it's still only been just a drop in the bucket on this particular subject. But going over, just to warn you, conflate, it means to mix or combine different ideas, concepts, or pieces of information into a single whole, often blurring their distinctions or treats them as identical when they are not. We went over various examples of conflating and things we each individually do a lot of times, like conflating socialism with communism, or conflating the brand name Kleenex or Band-Aid with the product in general. That's conflation. But when it comes to the subject of slavery, let's not conflate things that should not be conflated. We should not conflate slavery with racism. We should not conflate slavery with abuse. We should not conflate various things thinking they are one and the same, because they're not. Slavery is its own separate subject. Racism is its own separate subject. Abuse, physical abuse, is its own separate subject, and those three do not go hand in hand together. Sometimes they occur all at the same time, but they are not one and the same thing. There are different forms and types of slavery that we went over during this presentation. However, there are even more than what we went over, and sometimes the types or the forms get different names, or they might be described a little bit differently. But these are the main types that I was able to find in my particular research. And the types we went over during this particular teaching are chattel slavery, debt slavery or debt bondage or peonage, contract slavery, also known as indentured servitude, serfdom or bind the land labor, forced labor, state or war slavery, pawnship or panyarring, which from what I found out, it was particularly isolated to West Africa. There is descent-based slavery, where you're born into slavery. There is child slavery, where children are enslaved. There is domestic servitude, where people are forced to work in domestic situations and often isolated and abused. And then there is military slavery that we went over in this particular teaching, where people are used for military service or military projects, things like that. Slavery has been practiced by the vast majority of the world throughout the majority of history. In fact, you look at the overall pie of history or the timeline of history, you'll see that the vast majority of history has involved slavery, much more so than points in history that did not have slavery. Civilizations, cultures have practiced slavery all around the world, all throughout history. And some of those that we have went over during this particular teaching is Mesopotamia, the Babylonians, things like that. Ancient Egypt, obviously, we read that in scripture. There is ancient Greece, ancient Rome. There is Africa and just about every single country in Africa. There are the Aztecs and, of course, also the Mayans to a certain degree. There was the Vikings. The slavery has been practiced and still is practiced in the Asiatic region as well. And we saw also that Native Americans, even here in America, they were practicing and engaged in slavery even long before the Europeans came over. So slavery is something that is almost ingrained in just about every single society around the world, and not any country I know of or any piece of land on earth is free from the history of slavery. But take all that we learned about slavery as an overview around the world in this particular video. Remember that, take the notes that we gave you, and compare it to what we learned about slavery in the scriptures, and that's coming up next week. Make sure to check that out, compare it to what you learned tonight, and see how that all fits together and make your own mind up. But at the very least, you'll be a lot more educated and know a lot more about what the Bible says about slavery after next week and the end of this particular two-part series. So we hope that you got something out of this. We hope that you learned something. We hope that it sparked a fire and interest to learn even more. And if it did, go down below and in the comments, let us know what you learned or what particular point in the video sparked your interest. While you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so that you're notified every time that we go live or upload a new on-demand video. Hit that like button if you liked it. Hit that downvote button if you didn't like it, but let us know down in the comments so that we can improve future videos. And finally, before you leave, make sure to hit that share button and share this around with someone that you may know through social media, email, text message, or what have you. And finally, before you go, make sure to remember that if you would like the notes, the on-demand video, and the slides that you can go through at your own pace, that's all available for you for free on our website at godhonesttruth.com. Click on the post for this episode, or more conveniently, go down below, click on the link for the article post, and that'll take you directly to that page on our website. So in just a moment, we'll be getting to tonight's Aaronic benediction. But before we get to that, we're going to take a short break, give you time to grab something to drink and get those that are there with you gathered next to you. So when we do the Aaronic benediction, while you're doing that, I want to thank everyone who supports us financially. Like always, we really, really do appreciate it. And every single penny goes right back into the ministry of Yahweh here on earth through God Honest Ministry. I'm sorry, God Honest Truth Ministry. Wow, I've been talking way too long tonight. But thank you so much for your financial donations. And if you would like to know more and get involved with supporting us financially, you can go to our website at godhonesttruth.com or write to us through our email at team@godhonesttruth.com. And also want to thank everyone, especially for their prayers and their words of encouragement over this past year and still continuing now. We really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much for those prayers and those words of encouragement. All right. Hopefully everyone has gotten together, anyone there with them. And let's go ahead and do tonight's Aaronic benediction. Yivarecheka Yahweh, Vayishmerecha. Yair Yahweh panah elecha, vihunecha. Yisah Yahweh, Vayasem lech panah elecha, Vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and guard you. May Yahweh make his face shed light upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up his face unto you and give you peace. Thank you once again for joining us for this particular episode of the God Honest Truth live stream. We hope that you got something out of it, and we hope this particular Shabbat is restful, not just for your body, but also for your mind and for your spirit. We hope this next upcoming week is filled with good food, good family, good fortune, good health, and good spirits. And until we meet again, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
Yahweh bless you, Yahweh guard you, Yahweh make his face shine upon you, and show favor to you. Yahweh lift his face upon you, and give you peace. Yahweh bless you, Yahweh guard you, Yahweh make his face shine upon you, and show favor to you. Yahweh lift his face upon you, and give you peace. Yahweh bless you, Yahweh guard you, Yahweh make his face shine upon you, and show favor to you. Yahweh lift his face upon you.